we can approach life in a reactionary way, or we can approach life as an architect to our life. And by dedicating the time and energy to really strategically take a look at my life and where do I want to spend my energy, the likelihood of success increases, I think, dramatically.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Well, hello and welcome to the Gentle Art of Crushing It. My name is Derek Felch. I am one of 7 hosts that bring you content 3 days a week to try to provide you information, resources, and motivation to succeed. Today, we are hosting what we would call a group super chat. We have 4 of our other hosts joining me. I have Randy, Sean, Nathan, and Doug. And we want to talk about goals and goal setting. Being the early part of the year when you should be listening to this, we want to just kind of share what we've learned about goal setting, maybe talk about what some of our goals are and some of the things we've learned along the way. So to get started, gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us here. Let me ask one question before we get into goals. Why do you think people fail at goals?
I have been doing kind of like a goal setting process for a handful of years, my wife and I actually. And I think probably the biggest reason why the goals failed when they did was that I didn't have some type of follow-up process or some type of process where I'd go back and review them regularly. So I think that's probably the number one reason why I had failed goals in the past.
I think even just stepping back a sec there, I feel like people in general maybe don't even have the mindset to think about setting goals in the first place. And I think, most people that I encounter, I guess, I feel like they just assume life is going to happen and things are going to happen in due time. And you just, go about your day, one day to the next, and you will get to where you want to go just auto-magically, right? And that's where I see the biggest difference between kind of the folks that are very goal-oriented, who set goals, right, and those who don't. And I think I would agree 100% with Randy, is kind of once you figure out where you want to go and how you can convert that destination, so to speak, into goals, then to obviously kind of follow up with that, keep track of them, audit them, see how well you've done, right?
I love your term, auto-magically. I'm writing that one down. That will get used this week. I love it.
So goal settings,
very engineering, very technology term.
Right.
It's used a lot in the technology space.
Yeah, I like that, Nathan. But goal setting's easy when you're, on vacation, you're feeling relaxed, it's the new year, you're in Florida on the beach or whatever. You can set all these lofty goals, but it's keeping, like you said, Randy, it's keeping those goals in front of you. And then on an ongoing basis, you have to have that persistence to even go review them, to keep them top of mind, because you're not going to be on the beach the whole year. So those goals are going to get hard, life gets in the way. And I think that's what is the biggest detractor from goals.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in real quickly. Yeah, thanks, Derek. I was going to say, I agree with you three, absolutely, 100%. And one of the biggest ways to fail at goal setting is not to set them ever, right? Sort of like what Nathan, was pointing on. And so, set the goals. It's kind of like failing to plan or failing to plan is plan to fail, right? So, there's no harm in setting goals, even if you're concerned you're not going to meet any of them. It is a great tool for all of us to use, and it sort of brings awareness. Talking about the reticular activating system, which I don't want to dive into right now, but if we don't have awareness of what our goals are, we're not really going to work towards them, right? So, yeah, I love it. I love this concept, and could talk about it forever. And I'm excited to hear what you all are, gonna bring to the table today.
So what is your goal setting process? Somebody somebody want to share how they've learned, how they found it works well for them to set goals?
Yeah, so I'll kind of jump in here and kind of walk through the process that I've used over the last, I think it's about 8 or 9 years. My wife had been doing this. You hear Brandon Turner talk about like a date event where the same time every year, you and me and my spouse, we actually get together and we actually put it on the calendar and we designate it. It's going to happen. Usually it happens during the holiday week. So sometime between Christmas and New Year's, because inevitably we have some time off, and we like to dedicate an entire day to that process and not put anything else on the calendar during that period, because it's become kind of a sacred time for us as we kind of plan out our whole year and actually come together on items as well. So we both will look at this through the lens of like individually, what do we need to do? But then as a couple, as the unity of our household, what do we need to do to keep striving towards goals together? So we identify a day. We pick a different format, and we've used different formats over the years. Tony Robbins has different formats. Jim Rohn has a great format. There's all kinds of different formats out there, but as a general premise, most of the time there is this brainstorming process where we take a look at different life areas and we brainstorm all the things that we want to do. I think Brandon talks about the wheel of life or something along those lines, where we're looking at our physical goals, we're looking at our financial, maybe our work and career. I like to have bucket list items on there as well, relationships and family, and really take a look at all aspects of our life. And we just do this big brainstorming session. We write down everything that we could ever possibly want, and then we go back and review, and we pick 1 to 3 items out of each category that we want to focus on for the whole year. And that's kind of our early phase process for getting the process started. But I'd love to hear what you guys are doing to get it started as well.
I'm curious, Randy, do you do these? It sounds like it, but I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. It sounds like you bucket kind of the different goals in different areas that you want to focus on. Is that right? And if so, what are those buckets for you typically, or you and your spouse?
Yeah, so we do bucket those. We look at spirituality, like what do I want to do to grow in spirit? From a health standpoint, what items do I want to focus on from a health? So is it, exercise or diet or meditation or whatever that may be? We take a look at finances. We always have like a net worth goal, like we're here today, we want to be here by the end. We have savings goals as well within the finances, and giving goals within the finances. And then also taking a look at the bucket of work and career and contribution. So how do we want to bring value to the world outside of just those other areas? So yes, I think it's important to have a full, just a well-rounded life, and have goals that are well-rounded and targeted in each area as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was asking because that's very much what my wife and I do, and what I do personally. Right, we have different buckets, different dimensions that we like to focus on. So I'll have goals across all of those different buckets for any given period of time. Family, parenthood, just relationship with my wife, W-2, real estate, wealth, health, and I kind of break those down and kind of list. Throughout the current year, I'll go in and just list things in each of those buckets that are potential goals for the following year. And then those are the ones that we'll discuss together and kind of pick and choose, see how and where we want to improve either together or individually. And then go from there to do the next level, planning or, OKR or OKR goal. We tend to use objectives and key results, but like goal setting exercise, we'll go one level deeper once we've kind of narrowed down the items from those different buckets. And then ultimately one tool or trick that we use, and I think this is what you were referring to, Randy, is a life wheel, right? Which is, I think, technically a spider chart where you can give a score on how well you're doing along each of those dimensions. And that's a tool that's helped me and helped my wife and I a lot, simply because it's a very visual representation of where where I'm at any given point in time on each of those dimensions, wealth, health, family, parenthood, relationship, so on and so forth. And I'll spot check that every month just as a practice, just to see how well I'm doing, and how, maybe not how well I'm doing, but how in that moment, how I feel I am doing against all of those kind of areas of my life. And then I can always go back and look at the associated goals and if I'm making progress against those or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and it sounds like, as you were mentioning earlier on, like we can approach life in a reactionary way, or we can approach life as an architect to our life. And by dedicating the time and energy to really strategically take a look at my life and where do I want to spend my energy, the likelihood of success increases, I think, dramatically, because what you measure, right, gets accomplished. So, great stuff, Nathan.
Can I ask you guys a question, being that you mentioned your wives, and I've met Randy's wife, and I believe his words to me were she was basically perfect. So, but have you found, like, if there's somebody listening to this whose spouse maybe isn't as goal oriented, like I think of me, my wife and I have done a couple of these getaways for a day. I am definitely someone that could have a lot of flip charts and PowerPoints and slides and all kinds of stuff going and end up with about 800 goals. How would you advise someone whose spouse maybe isn't as goal driven or objective driven? How do you get them involved in that process?
I mean, I can tell you what I've done, or what we've done, I guess, because I think for a long time and still today, our relationship, and maybe not a relationship, but our personalities are very different when it comes to goal setting, my wife and I. And I think we went through, are still going through, I'm not sure what the right term is, kind of what you were describing, where we're not necessarily aligned on all of this. And what I've found works, or what worked for us, I guess I should say, was that I would move ahead with like the goal setting, for myself, for W2, for our family, for things like that, while consulting, right, and discussing this with my wife, right? Not necessarily trying to get 100% perfect alignment or agreement on those things. Even oftentimes, we'd have conversations that went along the lines of, you're crazy, you have too many things on the list, I don't want to, measure my life this way and all of that. To which I would respond, that's fine. Let me just do this for myself, right? Because it helps me. So, at the very least, it's beneficial in that way. And then I would go about kind of executing against those goals. And what I noticed is over time, when my wife saw the level and amount of progress and success that I was achieving because of using, these goals and tracking and measuring, then she got, drawn into mimicking behaviors and practicing and picking up things herself because she could witness and see this success. So it kind of, again, maybe automagically happened where she was like, wow, this thing seems to work. He seems to be going pretty fast and far. I love it. Let me try to do things like that myself. And that's what worked for us. I don't know that my wife's personality or mine would be okay with one or the other dictating anything or telling the other what to do. So I didn't try to. And it was just, like I said, we ended up being like, yep, fine, I'll do this for me at the very least, right? While involving you and consulting you. And that turned into, oh, wow, this works. I want to do it myself, right?
That's really good.
If I could say something here, I love that, Nathan, because you're leading by example, and that's how we're supposed to lead, right? Worst case scenario, let's say your significant other isn't on board with your goal setting at all. Do it anyways. It's going to impact your life positively. It's going to be beneficial for the relationship. and you'll both end up winning. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say do it anyways, and maybe over time, automatically, they'll come aboard, like as Nathan suggested. So,
I think
I love it.
I think it's really important to bring. Well, so our experience was that I had a very specific way that I wanted to do it, and I had. Imagine that, right? Bull in a china shop. You guys are probably figuring that out about me. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I can totally understand. Yes.
So, but what I found is my wife approached the goal setting process very, very differently than I did. And, I wanted to have SMART goals. I want them measurable. I want timelines. I've read the books and I've listened to the podcast, but my wife more so wanted to have, she wanted to feel fulfillment, and she wanted to feel connection, and she wanted to feel like embracing social cause, like those types of things, which my analytical mind has a hard time quantifying that, but that doesn't mean that that's a wrong goal setting process as well. So what we found is I have my way of doing it. She has hers. We come together on some of it. But we each have our own path. And, mine looks like this PowerPoint presentation that sits up on my wall that I can review every year. I can actually look at the last 9 years of goals and all that. That's great. My wife's looks like a notebook that has a bunch of different colors and it's highlighted and she puts pictures. But she really, really attaches to that and it motivates her. So I think what I've learned is there is not a wrong way to do goal setting. Just be sure to do goal setting, right? And everybody's going to have their own path with it as well. The bull will now quiet down for a minute. Yeah.
I think that's really good. I think we can fall in the trap, at least I can, where we try to adopt someone else's goal setting method, where, well, this is how the book told me to do it, and it doesn't fit our personality. And yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, well, so I start with my vision. I'm a visionary, right? And so I like to set a 3-year vision and then really work back from there and see, okay, what do I need to do to get there? Like Randy, I'm very analytical, so I like to follow the entrepreneurial operating system model with Traction, Gino Wickman, where you break down your goals into annual and then quarterly, weekly, daily. So really to be able to quantify everything, which works for me, but from a significant other standpoint, that's not what my wife wants to do or, how she thinks. So with that, what I found that works best is really taking a step back. It's because I know what I want. I know what my goals are, but it's asking her. It doesn't have to be in a formal setting, but figuring out what are her goals? What does she want? What does she want out of this vision? Because it's easy to form that for myself and then set the goals to work towards that. But if we can kind of set family goals where we're fulfilling a vision that excites her as well, and I make that goal for the both of us, and so we're both fulfilling this vision, then she gets way more excited to talk about it, and she's just willing to have those conversations. So it's kind of worked out for us. It's a good way I handle goal setting. It's not something she does, but I like to incorporate her dreams and vision into that as well.
That's good. Yeah. One thing I found helpful for my wife and I is at the start of our little goal setting day, and maybe you guys do this, we did a quick review of the last year. We're about a week ahead of time because my wife processes things. She actually thinks about what she's going to say and do versus, I usually do it, then think about what I should have done. But we asked the question, what worked this year and what didn't work this year and what was kind of confusing about this year. And we took about a week to fill out those sheets of paper. Well, she took about a week before we met, and then we just kind of reviewed those and looked for commonalities, and that gave us some keys for our goals for the next year. But I found that helpful for us.
Love it.
So thinking about goals, you guys mentioned systems. How do you find is the best way to track your goals? Once you've set them, Once you've established them for you, then what kind of things do you do to help track them and stay on course with them?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. Review them, right? Like, so as often as possible, if you could look at your goals, daily, that's great. Weekly, also very good. But a very powerful tool in goal setting and goal accomplishing is accountability, right? And so that's why we're all blessed where, we can run our goals with, past our wives and share them with them, and, they can share theirs with us. But even if you don't have a significant other, grab a friend, somebody that you can meet with weekly. Daily would be great, and I think this has been really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, Doug, that's awesome. I think the accountability thing is huge. For myself, my mind's always going 100 miles per hour. I have a million different things, and that's just the life of an entrepreneur, especially in real estate, right? And so if you do it can be a friend, it can be a significant other, family member, but also can be somebody you hire, to make sure that you're on track. Like one of my goals recently was to grow just marketing content, right? Marketing content and blogs and articles. And I know myself, if I just say, okay, well, I'm going to get up and do it, once a week, write it, it's just never going to happen. Like something else will always come up. But if I go out and I hire somebody to interview me and to help me put these things together to go out and publish, well then it's like, all right, I'm paying somebody, I have to be there, we have a meeting, there's accountability, and that's exactly what I did. But that can go into everything. It can be health, fitness, right? Like you can hire a trainer. So yeah, the accountability piece is huge.
Yeah, I would agree. Great stuff, guys. I think that's the key, Sean, is getting other people or putting process or system in place that's going to actually automatically hold you accountable. I think you're doing that in part by first and foremost sitting down with your partner and having them involved in that as well. But I've gotten to the point where, like, I take mine, I print it out, I put it on the wall, but I also print out like a one-pager that I keep in my journal, which I review as part of my visualization process every morning. So I'm looking down, and if it goes a couple of days where I don't look at it or I'm falling off, I can look back to that and see that this part of my wheel is starting to fail slightly. So time to kick it up and put a little more attention and energy in that wheel. And one of the things I've added in this year, which is new, as part of my journaling process, I've adopted the Miracle Morning or some variation of the Miracle Morning. And part of that process, one, is in the morning, first I'm writing down like...
hey, Randy, before you go too far, for those who don't know what the Miracle Morning process is, do you mind touching on that real quick? I do the same. I love that. I love the book and all that, but maybe, not everyone here understands or knows what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Miracle Morning is a book that was published. I don't even remember the name of the author, but there's a bunch of different versions of it. If my site wasn't so bad, I could say
Hal Elrod.
Yeah. So Hal Elrod came up with this idea called the Miracle Morning, and it's just basically it's based around this idea that all high performers have some type of morning routine, and he uses this term called savers, which is it's a prompt to help you remember what the different portions of the Miracle Morning are. So savers, the S is silence or meditation. A is affirmations, so saying affirmations. V is visualization. E is exercise. R is reading. And S is scribing or journaling. So if you incorporate all or a portion of the savers in your morning, the idea is if you start the day with discipline, that discipline is going to bleed over into the rest of the day. And, it comes down as simply as, do you make your bed in the morning? Those types of things. So starting discipline. But anyway, so Miracle Morning, really, really great tool. I've adjusted mine slightly to where my journaling exercise in the morning, I'm capturing gratitude. So 3 things that I'm grateful for. And then I'll actually after my meditation period, I'll jot down what I'm calling 3 inspired actions for the day. So kind of my 3 goals for the day. And part of that process also includes reviewing my annual goals. So all of that really kind of intertwines to really start my day off focused on my goals, and is really been just a great way to start the day. So um, that's one of the things that I'm doing in that arena.
That's really good. So, Doug, Sean, anything to add?
We're all in the Jason Drees Academy, right? And we're all involved in that. And Jason talks a lot about, like, he doesn't set goals. He just puts himself in this mindset. He basically puts himself in the frame where he wants to be, and he kind of lives in that. And that's a very interesting approach, because it's not like it's the complete opposite. It's not getting up and having this like exact routine and just copying what everybody else does, but really shifting mentally to where you want to be. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for myself, right? Because, I mean, as you go on and you're doing more and more things, you have you're growing, and you have imposter syndrome, right? Because to grow, you have to put yourself in these uncomfortable spots. So that's just always an interesting technique that I try to keep in mind and try to really embrace, right, from time to time, take a step back and really put myself mentally in that future position of where I want to be, of what my vision is. And then it's when you kind of take a breath and you take a step back, a lot of things, if your attention is on that, I think a lot of things happen to help you reach those goals. You kind of attract that sort of energy, so to speak. But
yeah, I feel like that's complementary to goals, right?
Yeah.
The Jason Drees, kind of mental hack, for lack of a better term, that you're mentioning, Sean, right? I feel like it's more about just getting your mindset right to be, successful. It doesn't prevent one, or shouldn't prevent one, from kind of, setting goals and tracking those goals, right, to get to that place that you want to be at, right? I feel like, at least the way I'm using it and interpreting it, is really around just making sure I'm in the right mindset to set these, lofty, ambitious, aspirational goals, and get myself in the mindset that I know I can achieve them. And then I'm going to, kind of figure out how I'm going to achieve them and with whom I can achieve them. And then, those things, right, become my goals that I then measure and track, right, to get there, versus, being in a, glass half empty, maybe, mindset, thinking that, these things are way too hard. I wasn't dealt the right, hand of cards and all this stuff, and just, I'll just stop there, right? That's kind of how I see the mental hack that you're talking about here, Sean, or at least that's how I use it.
Doug, Randy, what do you think?
I would agree wholeheartedly with what both of you guys said. That I think that through my involvement with Jason Drees, understand a future version of myself that looks like XYZ. I've been able to embrace that and kind of integrate that with a lot of the learnings and teachings that I've had over the years, where, like, Jim Rohn says, it's not the goal of making $1 million a year. It's the goal of the man that I would have to become in order to achieve that goal. So in my mind, what I've done with the Jason Drees coaching is I have this idea of this version of me, which I call Randy 2.0. Randy 2.0, and I reference the person that I've been in the past when I've been at my most highly productive and achieving state, with some adjustments to that. So when I sit down in the morning, I'm trying to channel Randy 2.0 without all of the negative things that came across with Randy 2.0 in the past, like the bull in the china shop and the, some of the rushedness, or the rushing around, or the frantic energy, trying to do that. And by envisioning that version of me, then it allows me to go do these things that benefit my family, benefit us financially, the health wise, and my community ultimately. So that it's kind of it seems a little grandiose at times, but that's really what I'm trying to do, is just show up as the best version of myself every day, if that makes sense.
What are your thoughts, Doug?
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. No, I was going to say that I love that, Randy. Randy 2.0 and showing up as the best version of yourself. And I also love that you touched on Jim Rohn, because the person that creates the $1 million is worth well more than $1 million, because that character that you built, could lose the $1 million and do it again, right? And as far as Jason Drees goes, like I literally think he's a genius. I know that the stuff like frame shifting that we're talking about in alignment, this stuff works. I've seen it, and the more that we can put this into practice, the better off we will be. And I do also believe it's complementary to goal setting. If you're someone who just doesn't like goal setting, you're probably not listening to this podcast, right? But if you are someone, there's you're gonna find your way, sort of like what Randy and I think Nathan touched on earlier. Is you're gonna find the way that works the best for you. I really I start with this massive list of goals, and I try to chunk them down into smaller, like to-do lists, little things I can mark off my to-do list. And there's a lot of tools out there like Tony Robbins, and it's interesting listening to Randy speak about his different techniques. He's pulling stuff from all these like trainings and stuff that I've heard of, and like you touched on the 3 things for the day. I use that as like Brandon Turner created the most important next step. What are my most important next steps of the day? I try to not have any more than 3, because you have like 5, 10, it's almost like forget about it. So yeah. And I guess one last thing I wanted to touch on before I forget is John Lee Dumas. He has a show called Entrepreneur on Fire. He's just like a powerhouse, super amazing human being. And he does this thing where he has one word for the year, right? So for my 2022, it was athlete. And I'm definitely in much better shape this year than last year. And so if you have one word that you can kind of refer to for an entire year, that this is sort of like your major goal, and there's a lot of areas you can have it in, then I think it's actually like really, really helpful. So simplifying, right? So I'll just throw it out there. My word for 2023 is a breakthrough. So I intend on having, breakthroughs in finances, more physical fitness, and so on and so forth. Hanging out with you awesome guys here and gals on the Gentle Art of Crushing It. And so what are your thoughts on that, Derek?
I think my takeaway, because I've really enjoyed going through some of what Jason has taught, for me, it's challenged me to think bigger. He makes that comment once in a while that we tend to set a goal within a few degrees or a few percent higher than we did last year. Okay, I made $200,000 this year. I'm going to make $250,000 next year. Instead of saying, but what I really want is to make $1 million or two. Like if you can set a goal to go up 10,000, why can't you set up a goal to go up 10 million? It's the same process, same things. And that's probably been one of my biggest takeaways from it, and challenges to think. And I like what Randy shared. I'm just seeing that future version of you and trying to understand that person's going to know more, just like we know more today than any of us knew 10 years ago, even though we thought we maybe knew everything 10 years ago. But, at least I did. But that we're constantly getting better and improving. And so those are kind of the things that stood out to me. I did have a question about accountability, and maybe this is just me. Here's how my accountability seems to go. I find someone, we'll call them Joe, and I say, hey, Joe, you want to meet for some accountability once a week? They're like, great, this is a great idea. And then we set a goal, and like, I'm going to walk a mile, and Joe's going to read a book. And then a week later we meet, and I didn't walk a mile, and Joe didn't read a book. We pat each other on the back, and then in the next week we're busy, we don't meet. And then within 4 weeks, Joe forgot who my name was. So is that been anyone else's experience? Have you found a way around that? Do I just have, I've been Joe too. I've been the guy who didn't show up, forgot to ask, gave people a pat on the back. Any secrets, tips
I mean, I actually
from
wanted
you
to ask
guys?
a very similar question. Then maybe you can also answer what I do, what's worked for me in that regard, right? But I'm curious to hear from others as well around, we're basically while we're recording this, it's the end of the year. We're thinking about 2023 goals. Typically, at least for me, you're setting these goals for 2023. You have these big, massive goals, right? That you try to think about or fit within like that year time frame. But then going from that to like daily or hourly, whatever it is, actionable steps and following through with that, that's really where one makes progress, right? And I'm curious what folks do to ensure that is happening. What are your tips, tools, tricks, or whatever, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation like you're describing, Derek, right? And I personally, so I have, I think, 3 tools that I use just all around goal setting. One is just a blank sheet for like my big picture goals, for 2023. And then I'll take that, as I'm, preparing for the year or whatever time frame we're talking about, and I'll break that down into like an Excel spreadsheet just because it's quick and easy and whatever, just to break it down into smaller quarterly steps so that I could see, more manageable, I guess, chunks of, work or things that I can do to make progress towards that goal. And then I take that down every quarter, or I take that, every quarter and break that down into, daily, weekly, or quarterly, actions and steps that I want to take to make progress towards those quarterly goals. And for kind of the daily tracking, habit forming, progress tracking, measurement, I use this app called Strides, which I believe may only be available on iOS and macOS. I think they do not have an Android version, so sorry for all the Android users. But that is the thing that, I will have, like today, I think when I was checking this morning, as I was doing my savers exercise, right, I will review all my goals for the day, and I had something like 25 or something like that. And it's as simple, it goes from, flossing, because I never was a good flosser, and now I want to build a habit of doing that, to W-2 goals, to real estate goals, finance, wealth, health, all of that stuff. And that's what I use. And what I like about the app is, to go back to the accountability question, I guess, or piece, is it has all this clever stuff to kind of gamify your goals and reminders and prompts and this and that and the other thing. And at the end of the day, I will get reminders automatically to see what I've achieved of my daily, list of goals and what I didn't achieve. And for me, that's the accountability, right? I think everybody's different, right? But I don't need to talk to somebody to say, hey, hold me accountable. I'm going to do these things. So they pull up this app every day and I'm like, oh crap, I did half of the stuff that I said I was going to do, right? So full circle back to savers, and my hack to making progress and actually making progress against those goals is, now I try as much as I possibly can to achieve as many goals as I possibly can before the day starts, right? So I'll just tackle every single one that I possibly can before 8 or 9 a.m. And then I'm like 70% through, and I'm like, great, I've got the rest of the day to just let things happen to me, because it's always the case with family, friends, work, all that stuff. And I have a much bigger buffer to achieve that delta and get to 100%.
Eat the frog first thing in the morning, right?
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Frogs.
Yeah, great book too, by the way. Yeah, I do something similar to that. I've added something in this year that I'm doing where, in addition to my morning routine, I've got a nightly routine. At the end of the day, I write down 3 things that I've learned and 3 accomplishments for the day. And then at the end of the week, I summarize all of those. At the end of the month, I summarize my weekly winnings and learnings. At the end of the quarter, and then I'm coming up to my first annual review of accomplishments and learnings, which has been, I will tell you, from a week standpoint, there are weeks where I finish at times and I think, man, this was not a productive week. But by the time I do my review, it's just amazing the things that I accomplished that I completely forget that I've done. And even more so on the month and on the quarter as well. So, I've heard a lot of really cool things here today.
Can you back up for a second, Randy, and run through that again? So you do 3 accomplishments a day. and then you, at the end of the week, you summarize all of those 21 accomplishments into your top, or you just list all, like, how does that work then to the month? Like, what does that look like? Because that's really interesting.
I mean, each time as you rack it up, it takes more time to go through that process. So yes, at the end of the week,
Okay.
and actually what I do is I review the week and I will highlight in one color my big wins, and I will highlight my big learnings in another color. At the end of the week, I combine all of those onto one sheet that says weekly learnings and weekly wins, and I actually take a picture of that and I send it to a friend of mine. So we both share that with each other. At the end of the month, I review all of the weekly ones, and I move those forward that I consider like the biggest wins and the biggest accomplishments. And then the quarter, and then at the end of the year as well.
And similar to
That's
that,
amazing.
I use another app that I love. It's called Day One, and I think that is available everywhere. It's basically a journaling app, but the main reason why I use that app and why I go through journaling every night, and one of the things we do as a family is around the dinner table every single night, we will ask each other, what were 3 things that went well today, to just kind of create the positive, mindset and whatnot. There's a ton of science that I won't get into now that links, positive mindset to health, wealth, and everything else. But back to the app, why I love that app, it has this feature where it will tell you when you're entering your journal for today, it will prompt you and pull up the journal entry that you did that same day a year ago, which then allows me to reflect on how far I've come, where I might have been, from a mental state perspective or goal setting perspective or whatever. And that just, for me at least, is a constant reminder of, wow, I really hated my life or whatever last year on this day because of whatever, and look where I'm at. Everything's good, and I made progress, and I've achieved a lot of stuff, and our family's good, and all that, and just constantly reinforces this kind of positivity.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah, Randy, what you're mentioning, it reminds me of The Gap and the Gain. It's which I started following. I read that book, really loved it. It's by I have it on my desk. It's by Dan Sullivan, but it's really on a daily basis. What are your 3 gains or wins from today? End of the day, write them down, and then what are going to be the 3 for tomorrow? And a lot of times you're tempted to write more or fewer, right? But he says stick to 3 from today and 3 for tomorrow. And that makes it more manageable too, because you start, you write down 25 goals for tomorrow, and then, your day blows up from the beginning. You don't get anything done. It's like you feel like you accomplished nothing. But 3 goals seems to be reasonable, and you kind of, again, it's like breaking it down, and as long as it's moving towards that ultimate goal or annual goal or vision that you have, I think that's a great way to go about goal setting. And then Derek, also you were talking about accountability, and I will say, like, I think it is more difficult to have like an accountability group if it's just like you and one other person. I think there is more accountability when you have a small group of people, right? So it's like 4 people and you're meeting weekly, because if it's just the 2 of you, it's like, well, somebody's always going to have something that comes up. But if you have a few more people in there and you set like a routine weekly meeting to hold each other accountable, or just to talk about their goals, the wins, the struggles, things like that, usually there should be at least like a couple people who can make that, and it keeps it going. And it's a good way that I found that has worked for me.
That's really good. I appreciate that. So, Doug, anything to add?
Yeah, I love that. I was just going to say, yes, accountability. I really love the group, setting that you brought up, Sean. And for me, I have multiple accountability partners. And what ends up happening is one individual will be working on, like, let's say prospecting. So then I'm working on prospecting with that individual. Another individual, we're working on a major goal. So then I'm working on, like, let's say, music for that. So I think having multiple and continually trying to make that more accountability partners is helpful, because some it's nice to have somebody that's really, really invested in your success. And that's just not everybody, right? So you might end up meeting quite a few people before you find that person or multiple people that want to do that. I wanted to touch on reticular activating system and why, because we're talking about, the gap and the gain and looking at our wins and our learning moments, which I love, like, learning, moments as opposed to a loss, because ultimately it's really only a loss if you look at it that way, if you define it that way, and we don't have to do that to ourselves. So focusing on the positive and, because you give power to what you focus on, what you focus on expands, right? And so, even if you only have 3 goals, just the fact that you set those 3 goals and that you have those, your reticular activating system, if I can just, sort of explain it briefly, is essentially, we're taking on so much stimulus, at any one moment that our brain has to filter out a majority of it. And so your reticular activating system is, let's just say, for example, if you, went to the auto sales place or the dealership and you bought a white Honda Accord, which I don't even know if they make those anymore. Before you bought that, you never noticed it. But afterwards, once you're driving it off the lot, you're driving it home, you start seeing them everywhere. So this is the power of writing a goal, and then you can start to see the opportunities for yourself to work on those goals. And it also is, putting that into our subconscious. So actually our subconscious is working on this when we're asleep even, right? So, for me personally, I'm a huge fan of goal setting, and this has just been a super awesome, conversation. So thank you guys very much for making it happen. I love it.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's important to say, and maybe just I'm speaking to myself, but I can see where people listening to this, it can be easy sometimes to hear a driven, structured personality like Nathan and Randy and feel intimidated or overwhelmed, like there's no way I can do a morning routine and have weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual. But I think going back to what you guys shared at the beginning that resonates with me is just to have some kind of a plan, even if it's one thing, even if it's just, hey, I want to drink more water this month. That's my goal. I think just having intentionality and a plan is so. I always compare it to I try to tell this to my kids who love my wisdom, by the way, they just eat it up. They, if you got in your car and you said, hey, I'm going to drive to the ocean and you're like, well, how are you going to get there? I don't know. I'm just going to drive. I mean, eventually if you stay west, you will probably, or east, you'll hit the ocean from where I live, but it would be much more effective if you had some kind of a route. And I think that's how a lot of us live our lives is we want to see the ocean one day. And we have no idea where it's at or how to get there. So yeah. Anybody, to wrap up, anybody have any goals they want to share publicly out loud to be accountable for over the next year when people see you or run into you? Or
I like the goal of making this podcast here super successful. Now, how that's defined, I guess, within 6 months, monetize it. But I think also more importantly is just this is successful as it is right now because we are learning from each other. We're growing closer to each other. This is sort of a mastermind for us, but also we are masterminding and making connections with amazing people, and the world is just chock full of those. So I love that goal for sure.
For me, I don't, I haven't set the 2022 goals yet, but me being in the self-storage business,
2023, I hope.
Sorry, 2023.
2022.
Yeah, I set the
that
2022
would be a bad
goals.
goal-setting habit there.
Yeah. So the 2022 goals were to close on approximately one self-storage acquisition a quarter, which I'm on track for. I did do in 2022, so I was happy there. But it was more about establishing my business, and now it's going forward into 2023 is trying to figure out, okay, what is reasonable in terms of that life balance, of how many I actually want to close on. But I don't know. Right now, if you ask me, I'd say about one a month would be my lofty goal for 2023.
I love it.
And I guess mine.
That's great.
Your You're a BHAG or a big, hairy, audacious goal, right?
Yeah. And I guess mine, from a passive investing standpoint, my goal is to help 100 people leave their W-2 jobs through the power of passive investing.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Fantastic
That's a great
goal,
job.
yep.
Great goal. So,
All right.
anybody else have anything else they want to share
Derek,
before we
you got
wrap up?
anything?
Not right now. I think it's about that time.
Do I have anything for a goal? Well, I've not set mine. I know that I need to do something around my health. I need to get, as we get older, our body starts to remind us that the things we could do in our 20s and 30s, maybe we pay a price for that in our 40s and 50s. So that's an area that I have to work on, and I'll get more specific on that here in the next few weeks. But yeah, that's definitely an area, and I want to be one of those 100 people that Randy helps leave their job at some point soon. So yeah, that's what I'm working at. So, well, thanks, guys. Anybody else have anything that they need to share, get off their chest, feel like they left out? All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.